All right, so um, cell communication, very important for an organism to maintain homeostasis. And you're going to see a lot of cell communication in how certain drugs work and how certain diseases occur. So we're going to get into some of the basics of that today. And the packet of guided notes is out there if that's something you want to follow along with. All right. So um, some things I just said. Cell communication, it's really, really important for the survival of cells because like each cell can't just do its own thing. It's almost like if you had a football team and everyone went out and said, I'm the quarterback. Like certain people need to do certain things on sports teams for them to be effective. It's the same thing with an organism. Each cell needs to. Can you see the whole screen? Looks like I don't have it there.
It's visible enough for
Okay,
me.
in my like
That's good.
the one I see, it kind of looks like it's off. All right, so cells have to communicate to be effective in a large organism. Um, some examples are, um, hey, when do we grow? When do we stop growing? When do we repair? When do we die? So, cell communication is responsible for all those sorts of signals and messages. So, how does this work? Okay, how do cells get this done? There are three big general methods, and the first one is direct contact. Cells are actually touching the cell next to it, and some sort of interaction or interplay takes place that tells one cell tells another one what to do. All right, local signaling. This is where a cell will release some sort of chemical message, and the cells in that general area are going to pick up that message and react to that message. Um, this doesn't have local would be a very small area, a very small range. Okay, then we have long distance. Okay, so same thing. It's still chemical based, but in larger organisms, sometimes we have to spread a signal around the entire body, either, and the speed of that might vary. That might be like your nerve telling your hand to move. Okay, that's going all the way from my brain out to my hand, and there's even some feedback where there are receptors in your muscles that tell your brain the position of your muscles. So when you wake up, even if you don't open your eyes, you know where your legs are. That's kind of what I'm talking about. So that's a two-way system. So we're going to start with direct contact. And when we talked about cells, we mentioned these little ways that cells attach to each other. So in the graphic below, you'll kind of see maybe a reminder of that. Okay, so when cells do this, they have little openings from there we go, from cell to cell, and those openings are sort of attached to one another. And chemicals go through these openings. Okay, so we're actually sending stuff from cell to cell. Now, some of the disadvantages of these are if cells get infected with viruses, these are sort of like really, really bad. We talk about social distancing. What's the distance here? It's 0. Okay, so if cells are infected virally, this is really bad. It's going to rapidly allow these cells to be infected rather quickly. So in animal cells, we have these little portals that are called gap junctions. They can open and close, okay? But some sort of signaling chemical will pass from one cell to the other. And that's bidirectional, okay? It can go either way. In plants, those are called plasmodesmata. And they're a little bit, I don't know, more complex in plants because you have cell walls that are adjacent to one another. But, in either case, some sort of signaling substance is going from cell to cell. Okay, in our next, another example of direct contact is in the immune system. There are cells called antigen presenting cells. Okay, so that's sort of the teal one here on your right. And the antigen presenting cells, we haven't learned about the immune system too much yet, but they directly will communicate with T cells by touch, by direct contact, okay? And once that happens, a message about the antigen is passed to the T cell directly. All right, now we're going to get into local communication, okay? In local communication, this is our second type. So our three types are direct, local, and long range. So here we are with our second type of local. And so in local regulation, some sort of secreting cell will release some sort of signaling substance, okay? These will travel a very short distance, and you will, on your body, you're going to have a very local response, okay? Some examples I think of in humans are when you are cut, you release certain chemicals that will initiate clotting, and we want that to stay very, very local. If that clotting signal was released all over your body, we don't want your blood vessels to sort of fill up with clots all over the place. That's a deadly situation. Those clots will go to your heart, your brain, your lungs, and kill you in minutes, okay? So some people have clotting disorders where they need to take drugs to sort of suppress or block signals that tell their body to make clots, okay? If someone's having a stroke, you can get them right to the hospital and they can give them drugs that stop or break up these clots in your brain. So there's a couple ways this happens. First of all, the signaling cell is definitely interested in hitting a target cell. Not every single cell is usually going to react to a signal. Only the cells that are important for that reaction will be released. Okay, and this can happen in lots of ways. Okay, say you get stung by a bee. Okay, you're gonna have, as long as you're not allergic to bees, you might have some local swelling in that area because your body's trying to bring in, inflammation's going to happen. Inflammation is related to healing, okay? And that's going to be a local thing. Same thing with injuries. And injuries, your body's going to release substances to recruit certain types of white blood cells to that area to increase blood flow to that area. Injury usually requires more blood flow for that healing to happen. Certain types of tissues don't have very good blood flow. An example of that is tendons and ligaments, okay? You tear a tendon or ligament, usually an athlete that has like a torn ACL is usually out 6 months to a year automatically, okay? That's because we don't have very good blood flow to those tissues. Where, let's say you get like, I don't know, a turf burn. Those are going to heal very, very quickly because your skin has good blood flow. In either case, local signals are going to secrete substances that promote healing in the local area, okay? And this relates to drugs too, okay? There's sort of let's say you have an infection in one area, you take an oral antibiotic, that antibiotic's going to hit your whole body. Versus like, do we give you pills where the antibiotic hits your whole body and there could be side effects from killing your healthy bacteria, or do we put like a topical antibiotic right in that area? And there's pros, I'm not a pharmacist, but there's pros and cons to both types of signaling. So if you think about taking an antibiotic orally, that's going to be sort of your, that's not local. Where if we, put some sort of local medicine, that's going to be just that area. A lot of times people will go in for some sort of minor surgery procedure. Like say you have an ingrown toenail and they're like, well, just knock me out. Just shut my whole body down so you can work on my toenail. That's usually not how we do things. We give you a local nerve block. So again, I'm getting into drugs because it's kind of my background with having a little bit of a medical background. So local versus sort of the whole body is a big debate in medicine, like which way do we do things. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this a little bit farther here, or further. So one of the types of local regulation is called paracrine signaling, okay? And I want you to sort of contrast this with endocrine signaling. You've probably heard of your endocrine system, like your pituitary gland, your thyroid gland. Your endocrine system does your whole body. Your paracrine is what I was talking about, like with clotting and with healing. Those are very local signals, okay? So how does this work? Cells that are responsible for signaling will release some sort of local regulator. That could be growth factor. It just depends on what's wrong with you. If you break a bone, there's a set of signals for bone healing. So these are very, very complex, and if these don't work right, you can there's all kinds of like terrible diseases that are related to broken cell signaling, okay? So a regulator is released, and there are targets on the cell membrane usually that make the cell's behavior change, okay? And that just depends on what set of pathways you're talking about. Biochemists will maybe devote their whole lives to studying one little set of these, okay? And in my little cartoon here, it's sort of like a one secretor, one target. It can be way more complex than that. Like clotting, blood clotting, I think there are like 14 stages to that. And if any one of those stages is messed up, you can either clot too much or not clot enough, okay? So you might have a tiny little cut when you cut yourself shaving and it just won't stop bleeding. Or you could have nothing wrong with you, start forming blood clots that kill you. So, we think about this. We never think about stuff like this, but if you have one of these diseases, these very complex signaling systems breaking down can be really bad news for your health. All right. Some other ways this happens, and remember, we're not talking about direct contact this time. There's signals that have to move some distance away. All right, synaptic signaling. Okay, this is limited to your nervous system. You've probably heard of a synapse before. Okay, if you took my anatomy class, you should maybe remember these. Okay, so in a synapse, the end of a nerve releases neurotransmitters that hit the very next nerve. It's very close, but it's still local, and nerves don't actually touch each other. So the distance these are traveling is very short, but it's still local. Okay? So different drugs, we did the mouse lab before break, will either speed this up, slow it down, they'll change the way this happens. So if you take heroin or LSD or marijuana or even alcohol or whatever, usually those drugs that are going to change your mood or your mental state are going to somehow enhance or slow down this system right here. A lot of drugs for mental health disorders like depression, anxiety, ADHD are acting in this area right here too. So, anybody remember the names of some neurotransmitters? How about dopamine, acetylcholine? Those are just a couple examples that I could remember. All right. These basically quickly diffuse across the space between cells, which is called the synapse, and this happens very quickly. Nerves travel, I think the speed of nerves is like, I want to say 400 meters per second, but that might be the speed of sound. I don't know. I know too much science. It all gets crossed. It all gets mixed up in my brain. Somebody can check me on the speed of nerve transmission. You guys can Google that for me. All right, long distance signaling. Okay. In long distance signaling, hormones are going to travel from some endocrine organ, usually. Sometimes it's just a tissue. Okay. A lot of what we're learning about metabolism is telling us that fat is actually way more complex than we think, and that fat tissue is able to release hormones too. So it's not just like glands like your adrenaline glands or your thyroid gland or your what's another one? Pituitary, your thymus, your pancreas. All these glands release certain hormones that change the state of your body. And they have to travel throughout your body pretty quickly. So they jump into your circulatory system, and your blood will carry these hormones from place to place. So we all know that humans have circulatory systems, but plants have them too. They're not as fast as ours, but they still will release hormones. Interestingly enough, plants can't move. So plants also can release hormones into the air that tell either themselves or other plants in the area what to do. So this is kind of a cool setup here. And a lot of times, like when we think, I think like when you smell certain smells in the air, those are plants reacting to changes in the environment. So really, really cool stuff here. I'm not much of a plant guy. I wish I was better at plant physiology. All right. So here's an example of long distance signaling in humans that I want you to know about, okay? And this is insulin, okay? Insulin.
Can you go back a slide?
Go back a slide for a sec?
Yeah, I just want to take a picture.
Okay. Got it?
Yep.
And I'll post it, so if you didn't get a good picture, I'll throw it up. Am I going too fast?
No, I'm just a slow writer.
Okay. It's real. My pacing as a teacher is really off when you guys aren't here. So just yell at me if you want me to slow down. Okay. So an example of long distance signaling that we're gonna get into is insulin. Okay. You probably heard of insulin. You probably know someone who might have an insulin pump or have to take insulin for diabetes. Okay, so insulin is going to be released by your pancreas in response to the consumption of sugars. Okay, so when we release insulin, it tells certain cells to react to sugars. All right, we're going to get into insulin a little bit more later. Let's see if you can answer these questions, okay? This is the stuff we just learned. No pressure. Okay, what I want you to do is type your answer in the chat, but don't hit enter until we give everybody a chance to type. Some of us are slow typists, so we want to check our spelling. So I've got the chat open. Okay. What type of communication involves a cell secreting a substance to an adjacent target cell? Just type your answer in, and when I say, you can hit enter, okay? Thank you. All right, go ahead and hit those enter buttons in the chat. All right. So what I was looking for there is secreting a substance, okay, is sort of your key word there. So a lot of you put direct or local. I was looking for paracrine is a form of local. If you put local, you're okay. Direct is not exactly what I was looking for, but now that I read the question, I can see why you put direct, because adjacent means touching, but because we're talking about secreting a substance, I should have put nearby target cell instead of adjacent. All right, so I'm going to allow you to, if you said direct contact, you can also give yourself a point there. All right, so for this one here, I'm actually using the words direct contact, but I want to know what structures, and you can go back and look at your notes and cheat if you want. What structure, and do the same thing, type it in the thing, but don't hit enter, and we'll hit enter here in a second. All right, go ahead and give me some answers. Plasmo something, that's right. Plasmodesmata is what we're looking for there, okay? Plasmodesmata. So that if you said plasmodesmata, you're right. Thank you for everybody participating there in the chat. I know some of you are probably a little shy and don't want to look wrong in front of everybody. We don't care, okay? This is practice, so don't worry about that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop my recording.